In this tutorial, we'll review the modeling environment, how to manage views, and how to use grids and guides to constrain the creation and manipulation of your objects. First, let's talk about the view manipulation tools. These are used to move, rotate, and zoom or magnify your view. You can use them as standard tools by selecting them from the tool palette, or you can use hotkeys to access them. You can find out what the hotkeys are by holding the cursor over the tool button to let the tool tip pop up. You can see that the View Move tool can be accessed by holding down the spacebar, the View Rotate tool by holding down the Shift key and the spacebar at the same time, and the View Zoom tool by holding down the Command key and spacebar. Unlike the hotkeys for other tools, you'll find that the hotkeys listed for the view manipulation tools act like spring-loaded buttons. Hold them down and they're on. Release, and the tool returns to the previously selected tool. For example, I'll select the View Move tool by holding down the spacebar. When I release it, the tool returns to the Move tool at the top of the tool palette. Holding down the spacebar again, you'll see an overlay that appears in the modeling window. You can click and drag anywhere in the window to change your view. Using the handles, you can move in specific, constrained ways. The View Rotate tool works in a similar way. The View Zoom tool lets you draw out a marquee region for the area you want to zoom to. Hold down the Option key and it allows you to zoom out in a similar fashion. Next, we'll cover the modeling window. At the top of the modeling window is a button bar that provides a series of controls. In the upper left corner, you'll find the View Orientation pop-up menu. Here, you can change how you view your model. Notice that the hotkeys are listed here in the pop-up menu. I'll change the view to front by pressing the number 5. You'll remember that you can always create your own custom view orientation by using the Move, Rotate, and Zoom tools from the tool palette. I'll rotate the view using the Shift and Spacebar keys. You'll notice that the View Orientation menu now says Custom. I'll use the backslash hotkey to change back to the 3/4 angled view, known as the isometric view. Design 3D offers a variety of ways to look at your model. Next to the View Orientation pop-up menu, you'll find the Display Method pop-up. The different display methods can be helpful in the modeling process, whether you need to see only the outlines or get a better feel for how your model will look in final rendering. Again, the hotkey shortcuts appear next to the items in the menu. New in version 8 is the Live Ray rendering option. When you have this enabled, the modeling view will generate a fully ray-traced rendering of the view, which can help you to get a better feel for model form and shape, texture placement, lighting, etc. Next is the Perspective selector. Use this to switch between orthographic view, which has no perspective, or normal perspective, which provides a more natural visual appearance. Or use the wide angle perspective. Orthographic view is useful while modeling because objects always appear at their actual relative size, regardless of how far apart they might be. Modeling in one of the perspective modes is useful because it looks and feels more natural and what you're used to in the real world. On the right side are buttons that give additional control. The first button is the Live Ray Render button. You can use this as a shortcut instead of selecting the command from the Display Method pop-up menu. Next is the Redraw button. You can use this to force the view to refresh. Next is the View Grid button. This creates a temporary grid that is parallel to the view. We'll cover more about grids later on. Next is the Maximize View button. This lets you maximize to a single view if you've split your window. The Plus menu provides ways to create and manage views, special display modes, controls to manage images to place in the back of the view, which we call backdrops, and a render command. One of these commands allows you to split the view. Just below each plus menu is a split view handle. Drag this handle down if you want to split a view horizontally. Each view can be customized to view your model. You'll find another split view handle in the lower left to split the view vertically. You can now use the Maximize view to make any one of the views fill the window. Now let's discuss grids and guides. The grids help you stay oriented in 3D space and provide a surface to draw your objects on. Every model starts with 3 default grids, X, Y, and Z. Only one grid is active at a time, and the other grids are hidden or dimmed. Let's look here in the modeling window. This is the Y grid that you see in the window. It's the active grid. It's called the Y grid because it's perpendicular to the Y axis. You can see the X, Y, and Z orientation by looking at the trident in the lower right corner of each view. You can change grids at any time. If I go up here to the View menu and select Active Grid, I can choose the X, Y, or Z grid. You can also use the X, Y, or Z hotkeys to quickly select a grid. Or you can use the plus and minus keys to cycle through the grids. You'll notice the grids are marked in different colors to make it easier to keep track of which grid is currently active. Earlier, when we went to the front view, you probably noticed that a tan-colored grid showed instead of the blue Y grid. The tan grid is the Z grid and is perpendicular to the front view. The reason the grid automatically switched to the Z grid is because the preference option named Auto Grid is turned on by default. Auto Grid ensures that you always have a grid that is useful for the view that you're in. If you don't like this automatic switching, just turn the option off in Preferences. Grids have subdivision units. Each line in the grid is one unit. These units can be changed in the Set Units dialog. I'll open that dialog from the View menu. Here, you can choose the scale you want to model in. You can choose feet, inches, millimeters, etc. You can also set the spacing or distance between grid lines down here in this field. This model is in inches with a grid line every 1 unit or inch. Now let's see how objects and grids work together. I'll draw in a 3D primitive object. I'll go over here to the tool palette on the left and select the Cube tool. I'll click and drag to draw a cube. All modeling takes place on the active grid. If I switch to the front view using the hotkey 5, Auto Grid switches to the Z grid. I'll just use the Y hotkey to switch it back so that you can see the cube is resting on the grid we drew it on. I'll turn off the Maximize view so we can see the cube from multiple angles. Let's move the object around. If I click and drag on the surface of the object, you'll notice that it keeps its position relative to the Y grid. Again, everything happens relative to the active grid or guide, whether that means drawing or moving an object. One of the exceptions to this grid relative rule is when you use an object's selection handle to manipulate it. I'll grab the top handle on the cube. Notice that the cube is now moving up away from the active grid and back down below it. I'll change to the Z grid using the hotkey Z. Now when I click on the cube surface to move it, the cube maintains its position relative to the Z grid. Now I'll change to the X grid using the X hotkey. Now when I click and drag the cube, it moves along the X grid. Now let's look at using guides to constrain movement. Grids exist in 2 dimensions, while guides are 1-dimensional. They're essentially a line in 3D space. There are 4 standard guides in Design 3D: X, Y, Z, and also a temporary perpendicular guide. The perpendicular guide is always perpendicular to whatever grid is active. You can summon a guide using the View menu, or you can use hotkeys. Let's see how guides work. I'll summon the Y guide by going to the View menu, selecting Current Guide, and then Y. Notice the guide which appears here in the center of the X grid. I'll hit the Y hotkey so you can see the guide more clearly. As you can see, there are little marks or subdivisions on the guide. They represent an inch just like the grid divisions. You can use the marks to position objects accurately. Now, when I drag the cube, it's constrained to move along the single axis of the Y guide. I can't move it left or right, just up and down. Notice the pale green temporary guide that appears while I move the cube. It indicates that the object's movement is being constrained by the guide. You'll also notice that the trident has a small green guideline in it. This is to remind you that a guide is active. This is handy for times when you're working in a view orientation that doesn't show the guide in the center of the grid. This little line will help you when you're thinking, why are things moving in a constrained direction? It's important to know that once a guide is summoned, it will stay active until you turn it off. It will continue to constrain the movement of any object in your model. Guides can always be turned off by using the semicolon key. This is the same hotkey that Adobe products use to show and hide their guides. Design 3D allows you to create your own custom grids and guides in any position relative to an object. This can help you scale, rotate, and edit geometry. If I select the Grid tool, I can click on the surface of any object and create a new custom grid. If I use the Guide tool, I can click on the edge of an object to create a custom guide. There are many other options for custom grids and guides. You'll want to check the user manual to learn more. The user manual can be accessed directly from Design 3D's Help menu and from the Getting Started dialog. That's all for this tutorial. We've reviewed how to manage modeling views and how to constrain movement using object handles and the built-in grids and guides. This creates the foundation you need to start creating your own models.